I built my company from scratch while they built their lies on my name. Crystal chandeliers threw diamonds of light across the vaulted ceiling of the Newport mansion. 200 guests. $30,000 worth of white roses. Champagne flowing like water over a cliff. And me, Olivia Hayes, 29 years old, standing in the center of it all like a stain on expensive silk. This was Victoria's bridal shower, my sister's coronation, the event where Boston's elite gathered to worship at the altar of perfection she'd spent her entire life constructing. I watched my mother, Evelyn, glide through the crowd in her custom Valentino gown, air-kissing women whose names she'd forget by morning. Her laugh was practiced, musical, designed to make everyone feel special while meaning absolutely nothing. She caught my eye from across the room. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes went cold as January harbor water. Then she raised her champagne glass. The room fell silent. "A toast," Evelyn announced, her voice carrying that finishing school polish that made cruelty sound like kindness, "to my darling Victoria, who has brought nothing but pride to this family." The crowd murmured approval. I felt my stomach twist. Evelyn's gaze found me again, sharp as a surgical blade. "And Olivia, you should really thank your sister for being gracious enough to invite you here today." Laughter rippled through the room, polite, knowing, the kind that draws blood without anyone having to raise their voice. Victoria stood beside our mother in a white Marquesa dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Sunlight from the floor to ceiling windows made her look like she was glowing, like she was touched by something divine. She turned to me with that smile I knew too well, the one that looked sweet in photographs but tasted like poison up close. "Well, Olivia," Victoria said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, "maybe if you make a few more million with that little startup of yours, Mom will finally invite you to sit at the main table." The room erupted. Not just laughter this time, full-throated amusement. Like I was the punchline to a joke everyone else had been in on for years. I stood there in my simple navy dress, the one I'd bought off the rack because I was too busy building my fintech company to care about designer labels, and felt every eye in the room measuring my worth. Finding me lacking, I wanted to leave, wanted to walk out with whatever dignity I had left, but my feet wouldn't move. Evelyn glided closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor like a countdown. She leaned in, close enough that only I could hear, her breath smelling like expensive wine and old resentment. "Don't you dare dream that anyone in this family will ever consider you a real part of it," she whispered. The words hit like a fist to the solar plexus. I turned away before she could see my eyes water, before anyone could witness the crack in my armor. That's when I saw him, James, Victoria's fiancé, standing near the terrace doors with a glass of scotch, watching the whole scene unfold. Our eyes met for half a second, and in that brief moment, I saw something unexpected. Pity. Not the cruel, mocking kind. Real pity, like he understood something the rest of this room didn't. Then he looked away, and I was alone again. I left without saying goodbye, walked out of that mansion into the crisp New England air, got in my Tesla, and drove back to Boston with my hands shaking on the wheel. The humiliation sat in my chest like a stone, heavy, immovable. But I'd survived worse than this. I'd built a company from nothing while my mother told everyone I'd fail. I'd secured $3 million in Series A funding while Victoria was getting her fourth nose job. I could survive this too. Or so I thought. The email came the next morning at 6:47 a.m. I was at my desk in my Back Bay office, third coffee already going cold, when my business partner Marcus called. His voice was tight, careful. "Liv, we've got a problem. The Ashford contract. They're pulling out. $3 million. 18 months of negotiations. The deal that was supposed to take my company from promising to unstoppable." "What?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. "Why?" "We signed the term sheet. We're 2 weeks from close." Marcus was quiet for a moment, too quiet. "They said there were concerns about your character, about your business practices." He paused. "Liv, they mentioned rumors. About you cheating investors, cooking books. They said the information came from family sources." The room tilted. Family sources. I laughed. Couldn't help it. A bitter, broken sound that echoed off my office walls. Of course they did this. Humiliating me at a party wasn't enough. They had to go for the throat. Had to try to destroy the one thing I'd built that they couldn't touch, couldn't claim, couldn't take credit for. I hung up with Marcus. Sat there in my office as the sun rose over Boston Harbor, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that felt like a mockery. And something shifted inside me. The part of me that had spent 29 years trying to earn their love, trying to prove I was worthy of the Hayes name, that part finally died. What replaced it was something harder, colder, more dangerous. If Evelyn and Victoria wanted war, they'd have it. But they had no idea who they were fighting. Stay with me if you've ever been buried alive by the people who were supposed to love you. Because what happens next, how Olivia turned her family's cruelty into the weapon that brought their entire world crashing down, that's a story you need to hear. The text came exactly 1 week after the bridal shower. 7 days of watching my business partners scramble to save the Ashford deal. 7 nights of lying awake wondering how much damage my own family could do before I had nothing left. Then my phone buzzed at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number, Boston area code. I almost didn't answer. The voice on the other end was familiar. Robert Chen, my father's financial advisor for 20 years. The man who'd helped Dad build Hayes Industries from a 2-person operation into a $50 million enterprise. Miss Hayes, Olivia. His voice was tight, uncomfortable. I need to speak with you about your trust fund. My father had died 3 years ago. Heart attack at 58. Too young, too sudden. But before he went, he'd made sure I was taken care of. A trust fund with $100,000. His final words to me were simple. Use it to start something big. So I had. That money had been my seed capital, the foundation of everything I'd built. What about it? I asked, already knowing something was wrong. Robert took a breath. The account was emptied 2 months ago, $100,000, single withdrawal. The world stopped spinning. By who? The authorization shows Evelyn Hayes, your mother. She had power of attorney. I ended the call, sat there on my couch in my Back Bay apartment, staring at the city lights through floor-to-ceiling windows that suddenly felt like prison bars. Power of attorney. My mother had convinced me to sign it years ago, right after Dad died. Said it was just for emergencies. For estate management, I'd been 26 and drowning in grief. I'd signed without reading it. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. I pulled up my laptop with shaking hands, logged into the trust account, the one I never checked because I'd already withdrawn what I needed for my startup years ago. Or so I thought. The transaction history loaded. There it was, 2 months ago, withdrawal by Evelyn Hayes, $100,000. Complete liquidation. I scrolled through old statements, saw deposits I'd never made, interest accumulating. Dad had kept funding it even after I'd taken the initial capital, building it back up, planning for my future. And Evelyn had taken every penny. I knew where it went. Didn't need an investigator to tell me. Victoria's wedding was costing $200,000. The invitations alone were $300 each. And that Miami condo she'd been posting about on Instagram, the one she called her wedding gift to myself, had a down payment of exactly $100,000. They'd stolen my inheritance to fund my sister's fantasy life. I sat there as the realization crashed over me like a wave. Everything I had, my company, my reputation, my success, I'd built it from nothing, from scratch, with my own hands and mind and will, while they lived off what they'd taken from me. The irony was almost beautiful. I picked up my phone, dialed my mother's number. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice sugary sweet. Olivia, darling. How unexpected. You took my money. My voice was calm, eerily calm, the kind of calm that comes right before the storm. Evelyn laughed. Light, dismissive. Oh, Olivia, don't be so dramatic. We're a family. Everything I have is yours. Wrong. I let the word hang in the air between us. Everything that was mine isn't yours anymore. Silence. Then her voice turned sharp, cutting. Your father would be ashamed of your selfishness. That money went to something beautiful. Your sister's future, her happiness, something you clearly know nothing about. My father left that money to me, not to you, not to Victoria, me. Well, it's gone now, and there's nothing you can do about it. She sounded almost gleeful. Maybe this will teach you that family comes first, something you never learned. I hung up, sat there in the quiet of my apartment, listening to my own heartbeat, feeling something shift and settle inside my chest. From that moment on, I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter. The next morning, I walked into the offices of Thornton Investigations, third floor of a brownstone in the financial district, the kind of place that specialized in corporate fraud and high net worth divorces. I hired the best. Cost me $15,000 upfront, worth every penny. I need you to follow the money, I told the lead investigator, a former FBI agent named Sarah Rourke. Every transaction, every transfer, every lie my family has told with my name attached to it. Sarah looked at me across her desk. Gray eyes. No nonsense. What are we looking for? Fraud. Forgery. Anything that proves they stole from me. She smiled. Slow and dangerous. I love family cases. 3 weeks. That's all it took. Sarah delivered a file 2 inches thick. Bank records. Forged signatures. Email trails. My mother had fabricated a power of attorney extension I'd never signed. Used it to access not just the trust fund, but other accounts. Investment portfolios my father had set up. Victoria had helped. Played secretary. Witnessed the forgeries with her own signature. They'd been robbing me blind for 3 years. I sat in Sarah's office, reading through page after page of evidence, and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. Not because the truth didn't hurt. It did, like a knife between the ribs. But because now I had power. Evelyn was still planning Victoria's wedding reception at the Newport mansion, posted about it constantly on Facebook. The unity of family, the strength of the Hayes name. How blessed she was to have 2 daughters. She had no idea what was coming. I smiled, closing the file. I had a plan now, a plan that would expose every lie, every theft, every moment of cruelty they'd inflicted. And when I was done, the Hayes family name would mean something very different. It would mean justice. The email arrived at 2:37 a.m. on a Thursday. I was still awake, still working, building my case piece by piece while the rest of Boston slept. Unknown sender. Subject line. You need to see this. My finger hovered over the delete button. Could be spam, could be a virus, could be another attack from my family. But something made me click. The email contained no message, just attachments, dozens of them, screenshots of text messages, email threads, photos. I opened the first one. A text conversation between 2 contacts listed only as E and J. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks ago. E, everything is falling into place, my sweet boy. Soon the business will be ours. J, I know, Mom. But what if she finds out? What if Olivia realizes? My heart stopped. Mom? James had called someone Mom, and that someone was texting like Evelyn, short, clipped, controlling. I scrolled faster. More messages. Years of them. E. Victoria suspects nothing. She's too vain to see what's right in front of her. J. This feels wrong. She's my. E. She's nothing to you. Family is what we make it, and we're making a dynasty. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I opened another file. An email from 29 years ago. Evelyn to someone named Richard Thornton, a business partner of my father's. I'm pregnant. It's yours. No one can ever know. Another email. 5 years later. James is thriving. Your money has ensured he has the best education. When the time is right, we'll bring him into the fold. My husband suspects nothing. I stood up, paced my apartment, tried to make sense of what I was reading. James, Victoria's fiancé, the man she was about to marry in 3 weeks. He was Evelyn's son, her secret child, born from an affair 29 years ago with my father's business partner, the same man who died in a car accident when James was 10. Convenient. Too convenient. I kept reading, watched the story unfold in stolen pixels and forwarded emails. Evelyn had hidden James his entire life, called him her godson, brought him around the family like he was nothing more than the son of an old friend. No one questioned it, no one looked too close. And then she'd introduced him to Victoria, orchestrated their entire relationship, groomed him to marry my sister so the Hayes fortune would stay exactly where Evelyn wanted it, in her bloodline, under her control, with me completely cut out. The wedding wasn't just Victoria's fairy tale, it was Evelyn's insurance policy. I sat down hard on my couch, stared at my phone. At the evidence of a scheme so twisted, it belonged in a Shakespeare play. They were about to commit legal incest. Victoria had no idea she was marrying her half-brother. James knew. Evelyn knew. And they were going to do it anyway. I should have felt sick. Should have felt horror, disgust. But instead, I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and dark and absolutely done with playing nice. They want to bury me? I said out loud to my empty apartment. I'll make them bury themselves. The next morning, I walked into the offices of Whitmore and Associates, my father's law firm, the place that had handled the Hayes estate for 3 generations. Gerald Whitmore was 80 years old with snow-white hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human greed imaginable. Miss Hayes. He stood when I entered. Old school, respectful. What can I do for you? The Newport Mansion, I said, sitting across from him. The one where my sister's wedding is being held. Who owns it? Gerald's eyebrows raised slightly. You do, of course. The room tilted. What? He pulled a file from his cabinet. Thick. Legal-sized. My father's will. Your father left the Newport property to you exclusively. It was written into a codicil 3 months before his death. Very specific instructions. Gerald looked at me over his reading glasses. He wanted you to have a place that was entirely yours, untouchable by anyone else in the family. Does my mother know? She was never informed of this particular provision. Your father was quite clear about that. I sat there letting it sink in. The mansion, the 14-bedroom estate where Victoria was planning her $200,000 wedding, the venue Evelyn had been posting about on social media for months. It was mine. Had been mine for 3 years. And they had no idea. Gerald watched me carefully. Is there a problem, Miss Hayes? I smiled. Slow and sharp. No problem at all. I'd like the deed. And I'd like documentation of my exclusive ownership. Notarized. Official. Undeniable. He nodded. I'll have it ready by tomorrow. I stood to leave, paused at the door. One more thing. The wedding is scheduled for 3 weeks from Saturday. Rehearsal dinner the night before. Yes? I'm going to need security. Professional, discreet. People who can handle a situation that might get complicated. Gerald's lips twitched, almost a smile. I know just the firm. I walked out of that office into the bright Boston afternoon. The sun was shining. The harbor sparkled. People rushed past with their coffee and their problems that suddenly seemed so beautifully simple. I closed my eyes, saw the scene that was coming. The Newport Mansion, the guests in their designer gowns, the media, the business elite, Victoria in her $50,000 dress, Evelyn playing matriarch, James playing the perfect groom, all of them standing on property that belonged to me, in a home where my father's memory still lived, where they'd humiliated me, mocked me, tried to erase me. That's where I would end them. Perfect. The Newport sky was impossibly clear that Friday afternoon. Not a cloud anywhere, just endless blue stretching over the Atlantic, the kind of perfect weather that makes you believe in destiny. Inside the mansion, chaos dressed as elegance. Evelyn Hayes moved through the grand ballroom like a general commanding troops. Her champagne-colored satin dress whispered against marble floors. Staff rushed past carrying crystal vases and silk linens. The rehearsal dinner was set to begin in 2 hours. No, no, no. Evelyn's voice cut through the controlled chaos. The orchids go on the east tables, not the west. Do I have to do everything myself? A young caterer nodded nervously and hurried away. Victoria stood near the window overlooking the ocean, her rehearsal dress a confection of ivory lace. James beside her, his hand on her waist, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Evelyn passed them, paused to adjust Victoria's hair. Perfect. My perfect daughter. My perfect family. She glanced toward the entrance. What a shame your ungrateful sister refused to come. After everything we've done for her. The lie came so easily, so practiced. They'd never invited me. But I was coming anyway. The main doors swung open. Not tentatively. Not politely. Hard. Deliberate. The sound echoing through the vaulted entrance hall like a gunshot. I walked in wearing a white suit. Tom Ford. Tailored perfectly. My heels clicked against marble with the rhythm of a countdown. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Evelyn's face went from surprise to rage in half a second. What are you doing here? You're not welcome. I didn't let her finish. Walked straight to the center of the ballroom and placed a manila folder on the main table. My voice was calm, surgical. Before this celebration begins, everyone should know who the real owner of this house is. I opened the folder, Pulled out the deed. Official, notarized, undeniable. Held it up for everyone to see. This is the Newport estate deed. Legal ownership transferred to me by my father, Thomas Hayes, 3 months before his death. I let my eyes sweep the room. 50 people. Boston's elite. Business partners. Society vultures. I am the sole owner of this property. Everything you're standing on belongs to me. Evelyn's face drained of color. Actually drained. Like someone had pulled a plug. Victoria jumped up, her chair scraping against the floor. What are you doing? This is my wedding. I turned to her. My sister. The golden child. The one who'd never had to fight for anything. Your wedding is cancelled. The room erupted in whispers. Phones came out. Someone started recording. Perfect. I'd been counting on it. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice shaking with rage. You have no right to do this. This is family property. Wrong. I cut her off. This is my property. Exclusively mine. And you, I turned to face her fully, and all the staff you hired without permission have exactly 10 minutes to leave. Silence. Complete and total. Then I saw her. The Channel 7 reporter Evelyn had personally invited to cover what she'd been calling the wedding of the century on social media. Camera still rolling, capturing everything. I looked directly into that lens. My mother, Evelyn Hayes, stole $100,000 from my trust fund. Money my father left specifically for me. She used it to fund this wedding and buy my sister a condo in Miami. I pulled out more documents. Bank statements, forged signatures. She fabricated power of attorney documents, committed fraud, and borrowed money in my name to cover her crimes. Evelyn tried to speak, but nothing came out. I wasn't finished. But that's not even the worst part. I turned to James, watched his face go white. James Thornton isn't just Victoria's fiancé, he's Evelyn's son. Born from an affair 29 years ago, with my father's business partner. Victoria's head snapped toward James, then to Evelyn. What? She's been planning this for years, I continued, my voice steady as stone, grooming her secret son to marry into the family, to cut me out of the inheritance, to keep everything under her control. James stood frozen. Victoria backed away from him like he was on fire. The reporter's camera captured it all. Evelyn finally found her voice. Screaming now, "You have no right. This is slander. This is..." I threw the keys on the table. The sound rang out like a bell. I have every right. This is my house, my inheritance, my life you tried to destroy. I looked at each of them. And now, Mother, you're being evicted from the very place where you orchestrated your deception. Security appeared in the doorways. The team Gerald had arranged. Professional. Unmovable. Everyone has 10 minutes to collect their belongings and leave the premises, I said. Anyone still here after that will be arrested for trespassing. No one moved at first. Too shocked. Too stunned by the spectacular implosion of the Hayes family dynasty. Then someone started clapping. Slow. Deliberate. Others joined. Not everyone, but enough. Evelyn looked around wildly. At the guests watching her fall. At Victoria crumbling. At James standing there, exposed and helpless. At the cameras recording her destruction. You'll pay for this, she hissed at me. I smiled. Cold and certain. No, Mother. You already did. Security began escorting people out. Evelyn, Victoria, James, the caterers, the wedding planner, all the props of the performance they'd been staging. The reporter was the last to leave, still filming, already calling her station. This would be on the news by 6 p.m. Then the mansion was empty. Just me, standing in the ballroom where they'd humiliated me, where they'd tried to erase me. The sun was setting over the ocean, golden light pouring through the windows. It caught my hair, my white suit, painting me in shades of victory. I walked to the window, looked out at the Atlantic, at the endless horizon, and I breathed. For the first time in 29 years, I was free. 2 years later, Boston woke up slowly under a blanket of early morning mist. The city stretched and yawned, unaware of its own beauty. I sat by the floor-to-ceiling window of my seaport apartment, watching the harbor come alive. My laptop screen glowed with lines of code, financial projections, investor reports. The notification appeared at 6:43 a.m. Series C funding closed. Valuation, $40 million. I stared at the number, remembered the girl who'd begged her father for $2,000 to cover medical bills, the woman who'd had a $3 million deal killed by family lies. That person felt like a stranger now. My company had survived. More than survived, it had thrived. Turned into exactly what my father had believed it could be when he left me that trust fund. Start something big, he'd said. I had. But the money didn't matter as much as what I'd done with the inheritance I'd fought so hard to reclaim. Most of it went to the Haven for Survivors Fund, a nonprofit I'd established 18 months ago. It helped women escape toxic family relationships, provided legal support, financial counseling, safe housing, everything I'd wished I'd had when I was fighting alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother's theft had funded my freedom, and my freedom was now funding others. The bedroom door opened. Ryan walked out, hair messy, wearing my MIT sweatshirt that was 3 sizes too big on him. My partner, my chief engineer, the man who'd stood beside me through the entire war with my family and never once asked me to be less. You're up early, he said, kissing the top of my head. Couldn't sleep, too much good news. He looked at my screen, saw the valuation, grinned. We did it. We did it, I agreed. The front door unlocked. Leo came in carrying coffee and a bag from our favorite bakery. My half-brother, 27 years old with my father's eyes and a gentleness that felt like a gift. I'd found him 6 months after the Newport confrontation, discovered through Dad's old lawyer that my father had another child. A son he'd kept hidden from Evelyn to protect him from her poison. Leo had grown up not knowing the Hayes name, not knowing he had a sister. But when I'd shown up at his apartment in Cambridge with the truth, he hadn't turned me away. We'd built something new, something clean, a family chosen, not inherited. Valuation came through, I told him. Leo whistled low. 40 million. Dad would be proud. Yeah, I said softly. He would. We didn't talk about Evelyn and Victoria much anymore. Didn't need to. The story had made national news. The fraud investigation, the forged documents, the almost incestuous marriage plot. It had been a feast for the media. Hayes Industries was under federal investigation for tax fraud and embezzlement. The company my grandfather built, that my father had grown, was being torn apart piece by piece. Evelyn had disappeared from public life. No more charity galas, no more society pages, just silence. Victoria had deleted all her social media. The influencer life she'd built on stolen money and manufactured perfection gone overnight. James had left the country. Rumor was he'd gone to Singapore. Or maybe Dubai, somewhere far from the wreckage. I didn't care anymore. Their punishment wasn't my responsibility. Their consequences weren't my problem. I'd taken back what was mine and moved on. That afternoon, Leo and I sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that looked almost unreal. He was quiet for a long time. Then, do you ever regret it? What you did to them? I thought about it. Really thought about it. Remembered the girl at the bridal shower, swallowing humiliation with champagne. The woman who'd discovered her inheritance was stolen. The daughter who'd learned her entire family was a lie. Then I thought about who I was now, what I'd built, the women I was helping, the peace I'd found. I smiled. Regret it? No. I looked at Leo. I just regret not standing up sooner. He nodded, understanding in a way only someone who'd survived family trauma could. Later that evening, I drove to Newport. Hadn't been back since the eviction. Hadn't needed to. But something pulled me there. Some need for closure I didn't fully understand. I parked and walked down to the beach. The same beach where I'd played as a child before everything turned toxic. Before Evelyn made love conditional and Victoria made cruelty competitive. The sand was cool under my bare feet. The ocean stretched endlessly before me, dark and powerful and free. The wind caught my hair, whipped it around my face. The setting sun painted everything gold. I stood there, breathing salt air, feeling the weight of the past finally lift and scatter like ashes. My voice, when I spoke, was carried away by the wind, but I said it anyway, said it for me. They said I was too cold, too ambitious, too much. Said I didn't understand family, didn't know how to be grateful, didn't deserve the Hayes name. They were wrong about most of it. But being too much? That part was true. I was too much for their small vision of who I should be, too much for their need to control and diminish, too much for their carefully constructed house of lies. And being too much was exactly what saved me. I turned away from the ocean, walked back toward my car, toward my life, toward Ryan and Leo and the company I'd built, and the women I was helping build their own escapes. Behind me, the Newport mansion stood silent on the hill. My property, my inheritance, my father's final gift. I'd never sell it. Would probably turn it into something useful, a retreat center maybe, a place for survivors to heal. But for now, it could just stand there, a monument to the battle I'd won not with cruelty but with truth. The sun dipped below the horizon, darkness came softly, and I drove home. Not to where I came from, but to where I belonged. If you've ever been told you're too much, too difficult, too impossible to love, know this. Your too much might be exactly what sets you free. Thank you for following Olivia's story. And if it meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's peace they'll never understand.